I stood frozen in the center of my bridal suite, staring at the photo my maid of honor Elle had just shown me on her phone. There was my sister Victoria, arriving at my wedding venue in a stunning white gown that rivaled my own. "I've always looked better than you in white," she'd reportedly told a shocked bridesmaid. And there beside her in the photo was my mother, nodding in approval, her hand protectively on Victoria's back. This wasn't just another of my sister's stunts. This was a declaration of war on what was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. "Ariana, breathe," Ella urged, gripping my shoulders as the color drained from my face. "We still have 2 hours before the ceremony. We can figure this out." I sank into the nearest chair, my elaborate wedding gown rustling around me. The bridal suite at Heronview Manor was filled with half-empty champagne flutes and the scattered remains of our morning preparations. Outside, through the bay windows, I could see guests beginning to arrive for my wedding to Emilio, parking their cars along the tree-lined drive of the historic estate we'd spent months saving for. "I should have known," I whispered, my throat tight. I should have expected this. Carolina, my cousin and second bridesmaid, crouched beside me. No one could have predicted this level of, I don't even know what to call it. "I do," Elle said darkly. "Sabotage." But I could have predicted it. Victoria had been undermining my most important moments for as long as I could remember. When I graduated high school as valedictorian, Victoria announced her acceptance to an elite graduate program at the same family dinner. When I got promoted at work last year, Victoria somehow managed to turn my parents' congratulatory gathering into a celebration of her new condo purchase, and now, my wedding day. I closed my eyes, feeling the familiar weight of resignation settling over me. This was the pattern. Victoria would cross a line, my parents, especially my mother, would enable her, and I would be expected to accommodate, to understand, to make peace for the sake of family harmony. A sharp knock on the door interrupted my thoughts. Ella opened it cautiously, then stepped back as my mother bustled in, elegant in her blue mother-of-the-bride dress, her face flushed with what appeared to be excitement rather than embarrassment. "Ariana, darling, you're not dressed yet? The photographer wants to start on the family portrait soon." Her eyes swept over my half-done hair, the makeup artist still arranging her supplies on the vanity. I stared at her in disbelief. "Mom, I know about Victoria." My mother's smile faltered slightly before reasserting itself. "Oh yes, isn't she stunning? That dress was quite the find." "That dress is white," I said flatly. "She's wearing white to my wedding." My mother waved, her hand dismissively. "It's not white, it's champagne, or perhaps ivory. Either way, it's lovely, and you know how fair Victoria's complexion is. White has always suited her so beautifully." Elle made a choked sound of indignation beside me. Carolina's hand tightened on my shoulder. "She can't wear white to my wedding," I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. "It's disrespectful. It's deliberately taking attention away from the bride." "Now, Ariana," my mother's tone took on the familiar note of condescension I'd heard all my life. "Don't be dramatic. Victoria put a lot of thought into her appearance today. She wants everything to be perfect for your special day." "Perfect for my—" I broke off, unable to complete the sentence. "Mom, this isn't about making my day perfect. This is about Victoria, making herself the center of attention, like she always does." My mother's expression hardened. "I don't appreciate that accusation. Your sister loves you. She's always supported you. If anyone is making this into a competition, it's you." The breathtaking unfairness of this statement momentarily robbed me of speech. How many times had this exact scene played out in various forms throughout my life? Victoria would cross a line, and somehow, I would be painted as the unreasonable one for objecting. "Mrs. Winters, Elle stepped forward, her voice carefully controlled. With all due respect, wearing white to someone else's wedding is universally understood to be inappropriate. It's not Ariana making this into a competition. My mother turned a cold gaze on Elle. I don't recall asking for your opinion on family matters. Mom, I found my voice again. Victoria needs to change, or she can't be at the wedding. A tense silence filled the room. My mother stared at me as if I'd suggested something outrageous. Don't be absurd, she finally said. Your sister is family. She will absolutely be at your wedding, regardless of what she's wearing. Your father and I have paid for a significant portion of today, or have you forgotten that? And there it was, the financial leverage that had controlled so many aspects of my life. The reminder that independence came with strings attached, that acceptance always had conditions. Now, my mother continued in a more measured tone, I understand you're stressed. Wedding day nerves are perfectly normal. But I need you to pull yourself together and stop fixating on your sister's outfit choice. The photographer is waiting, your father is getting impatient, and we have guests arriving. Can we please move forward with the day as planned? Before I could respond, another knock came at the door. Carolina opened it to reveal Idris, Emilio's best friend and best man. He took one look at the tableau before him, me half-dressed and clearly upset, my mother standing rigidly by the window, Elle practically vibrating with protective anger, and his expression shifted from cheerful to concerned. Everything all right? He asked carefully. Victoria's wearing white, Elle told him bluntly. Idris's eyebrows shot up, but to his credit, he maintained his composure. I see, he said, then turned to me. Ariana, Emilio sent me to check on you. He wanted to make sure you were okay. The mention of Emilio sent a wave of emotion through me. Emilio, who had never been fooled by Victoria's charm. Emilio, who had always seen through my family's dynamics with clear eyes. Emilio, who was waiting to marry me despite the circus my family threatened to turn our wedding into. Tell him, I began, then stopped, unsure what message I wanted to convey. I wasn't okay. My sister had deliberately chosen to undermine my wedding day, and my mother was enabling her as always. But I also wasn't going to let them ruin this day. Not this time. Tell him I need a few minutes, I finally said, straightening my shoulders. And Idris? I need your help with something. What exactly are we dealing with here? Idris asked after my mother left the room, her parting words a thinly veiled warning about not causing a scene. Ellie pulled up the photo on her phone again, showing Idris. Victoria's dress is practically bridal. Look at this. Idris whistled low. That's deliberate. It always is with Victoria. I sighed, moving to the window to ensure my mother was truly gone. This isn't a one-time thing. It's a pattern that's been happening our entire lives. Carolina nodded, her expression grim. I've watched it since we were kids. Victoria can't stand when Ariana has something special. I turned back to face them, leaning against the windowsill. My 8th birthday party, she opened all my presents before I could. My high school graduation, she announced her summer plans. To study in Paris, so all anyone talked about was her trip instead of my valedictorian speech. My college acceptance. She suddenly decided she wanted to transfer to the same school after telling me for years it wasn't prestigious enough. Don't forget your promotion dinner, Ella added. Somehow that turned into a celebration of her condo. Purchase. Idris shook his head. And your parents just allow this? Allow it? I laughed without humor. They encourage it, especially my mother. Victoria is the golden child who can do no wrong, and I'm expected to be the understanding one, the accommodating one, the one who doesn't make waves. I moved to the vanity, staring at my reflection. My hair was half-styled, my makeup only partially done. In 3 hours, I was supposed to walk down the aisle to marry the love of my life, and instead of joyful anticipation, I was dealing with yet another of Victoria's calculated disruptions. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The worst part is, Victoria knows exactly what she's doing, I continued. This isn't accidental or thoughtless. The white dress showing up early, making sure I'd find out. It's all designed to throw me off balance, to make me react, to create drama that makes me look like the unreasonable one. Classic narcissistic behavior, Carolina observed. My therapist would have a field day with this. I turned to Idris. How's Emilio? Does he know what's happening? Not yet, Idris replied. He could tell something was off when your mom came through with Victoria, but he was in the middle of photos with his family. He sent me to check on you because he was worried. I felt a rush of gratitude for my soon-to-be husband. Emilio had always been my rock, especially when it came to navigating my family dynamics. From the first time he'd met Victoria 2 years ago, he'd seen through her charm offensive to the manipulation beneath. Victoria hates him, you know, I said quietly. She can't stand that he isn't impressed by her. The feeling's mutual, Idris chuckled. Emilio sees right through her. Which is exactly why she's pulling this stunt today, Elle pointed out. It's not just about upstaging you, Ariana. It's about asserting dominance over your relationship. She needs to prove she can still control your big moments, even with Emilio in the picture. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Ella was right. This wasn't just Victoria's usual attention-seeking. This was a power play directed at both me and Emilio. A declaration that even on our wedding day, Victoria could insert herself into the center of our narrative. You should have seen how she was working the guests who've already arrived, Carolina added. Greeting them like she's the hostess, showing off that dress, accepting compliments with this fake modest act. She even had the nerve to tell your Aunt Julia that the two of you had coordinated your white dresses as a special sister thing. My hands curled into fists at my sides. And my mother? Right beside her, Carolina confirmed grimly. Beaming, with pride like Victoria's the one getting married today? Your dad looked uncomfortable, Idris offered, if that helps at all. It didn't. Not really. My father's discomfort with Victoria's behavior was a constant throughout my life, but so was his unwillingness to actually intervene. He'd offer private, sympathetic glances, but never public support when it really mattered. Does anyone have a red wine bottle and good aim? Ella muttered darkly, only half joking. As satisfying as that would be, I said, it would only make things worse. Victoria would become the tragic victim, and I'd be the bitter, jealous sister who ruined her dress. The room fell silent as we all considered the impossible situation. I could confront Victoria directly, but that would create exactly the scene she was hoping for. I could appeal to my father, but he would ultimately defer to my mother's judgment. I could demand that Victoria change or leave, but given my mother's reaction, that ultimatum would likely backfire spectacularly. There has to be another way, Idris mused, pacing the room. A way to handle this that doesn't give Victoria what she wants. I looked at my reflection again, seeing the resignation in my eyes that had become so familiar over the years. The resignation that Victoria counted on, that allowed her to keep winning these twisted games she created. Something shifted inside me then, a realization that crystallized with sudden clarity. If I gave in now, if I let Victoria hijack my wedding day with her white dress and dramatic presence, Emilio and I would begin our married life on Victoria's terms. Every anniversary would carry the shadow of her sabotage. Every wedding photo would show her standing there in white, a visual reminder of her refusal to respect even this boundary. No, I said aloud, my voice stronger than I expected. Not this time. Ella, Carolina, and Idris looked at me with varying degrees of surprise and hope. What are you thinking? Ella asked cautiously. I'm thinking, I said slowly, feeling a plan begin to form. That Victoria expects me to react in one of two ways. Either I confront her and create a scene that makes me look hysterical on my wedding day, or I swallow my feelings and let her win again. She's counting on those being my only options. But they're not, Idris said, catching on quickly. No, I agreed, a small smile forming. They're not. Victoria thinks she knows exactly how this will play out, but she's forgetting something important. What's that? Carolina asked. I squared my shoulders, feeling more determined than I had in years of dealing with my sister's manipulations. This is my wedding, I said firmly. And I have allies she doesn't know about. For once, Victoria doesn't get to write the ending to this story. Exactly right, a deep voice agreed from the doorway. We all turned to see Emilio standing there, still in his dress pants and shirt but without his jacket and tie. His dark eyes were warm when they met mine, but I could see the tension in his jaw. Emilio, I exclaimed, momentarily forgetting the tradition that the groom shouldn't see the bride before the ceremony. I thought you were taking photos with your family. I was, he said, stepping into the room and closing the door behind him. Until Larry came to find me. He overheard Victoria talking to your cousins about how she was going to help you down the aisle since you'd be too emotional to walk properly. His expression hardened. Wearing white and trying to insert herself into the ceremony? That's a bridge too far, even for her. Larry was Emilio's cousin and one of our groomsmen, a quiet observer who never missed a detail. I shouldn't have been surprised he'd picked up on Victoria's machinations. So you know, I said, gesturing helplessly at Ella's phone with the damning photo. I know, Emilio confirmed, crossing the room to take my hands in his. And I'm not having it, Ariana. Not today. This is our day. The fierce protectiveness in his voice made my throat tighten with emotion. Throughout our relationship, Emilio had been my steadfast ally against Victoria's manipulations and my parents' enabling. Where others dismissed my concerns as sibling rivalry, Emilio had always validated my feelings and supported my attempts to establish boundaries. What do you want to do? He asked, his voice gentler now. Whatever you decide, I'm with you. If you want to confront her directly, I'll back you up. If you want to have her removed from the venue, I'll make it happen. This is your call. I squeezed his hands, drawing strength from his unwavering support. I don't want a confrontation, I said. That's exactly what Victoria wants. Drama she can spin to make herself the victim. Agreed, Emilio nodded. So we need another approach. Elle stepped forward. I think I speak for all of us when I say we're ready to execute whatever plan you come up with. Victoria may have your parents in her corner, but you have us. I looked around at the determined faces of my true allies. Emilio, whose love had helped me find my voice. Elle, my fierce best friend since college. Carolina, the cousin who had witnessed Victoria's behavior since childhood. And Idris, whose loyalty to Emilio extended to me as well. Thank you, I said, my voice thick with emotion. You have no idea how much it means not to face this alone. You're never alone, Emilio said firmly. Not anymore. He glanced at his watch. We have about an hour and a half before the ceremony starts. What's our strategy? I took a deep breath, organizing my thoughts. Victoria expects me to either cause a scene or suffer in silence. Either way, she gets to be the center of attention. But there's a third option. I'm listening. Emilio nodded encouragingly. We acknowledge nothing, I said, the plan crystallizing as I spoke. We don't confront her about the dress. We don't try to make her change. We don't even act like we've noticed anything unusual. Carolina tilted her head. Completely ignore the white elephant in the room? More than that, I continued, warming to the idea. We make her invisibility part of the strategy. Victoria in white should be impossible to miss, right? So what if we create circumstances where she somehow fades into the background? Idris's face lit up with understanding. I like where this is going. What if, I said, looking at Emilio, we made a few adjustments to the ceremony and reception? Nothing major, just enough to ensure that Victoria's grand gesture goes completely unnoticed. Emilio smiled, that slow, calculating smile that appeared when he was working through a complex problem. We could rearrange the family seating, he suggested. Move your parents and Victoria from the front row to the second or third, behind my larger family members. And we could change the photography. Plan, Elle added excitedly. Have the photographer focus exclusively on specific groupings that just happen not to include Victoria in her spotlight-stealing dress. We could also make some adjustments to the reception seating, Carolina suggested. Instead of the family table being front and center, we could place it off to the side, partially blocked by the cake table or floral arrangements. And, Idris added with a mischievous grin, we could ensure that in any photos Victoria does manage to get into, she's perfectly blocked by someone or something. A strategic groomsman here, a well-placed bridesmaid there. I looked at Emilio, feeling a spark of hope for the first time since seeing that photo. Can we make these changes so last minute? Absolutely, he assured me. Idris and I are friends. With the venue coordinator, remember? And the photographer is my cousin's wife. She'll be more than happy to adjust the shot list. What about my parents? I asked, the familiar worry creeping back in. If they realize what we're doing, leave them to me, Emilio said firmly. Your father and I have an understanding. And as for your mother... He paused, choosing his words carefully. Let's just say I've been saving a particular conversation for a special occasion. This seems like the right time. I raised an eyebrow, curious about what that meant, but Emilio just winked. Trust me, he said. Focus on getting ready and feeling beautiful. Let us handle the logistics. The makeup artist and hairstylist had been waiting patiently during our impromptu strategy session. With a renewed sense of purpose, I returned to the vanity chair, allowing them to resume their work. One more thing, Emilio said before leaving. No matter what happens, remember why we're here today. We're getting married because we love each other and want to build a life together. Victoria, your parents, all of this, it's background noise. You and me, we're the main event. He leaned down and kissed me softly, ignoring Elle's protest about ruining my partially applied lipstick. I'll see you at the altar, he whispered. The most beautiful woman in the room, in the only white dress that matters. As Emilio left with Idris to implement our plan, I felt a strange calm settle over me. For the first time in facing one of Victoria's manipulations, I wasn't alone. I had allies who understood, who validated my feelings, who were willing to take concrete action to protect our special day. Elle, I said, as the hairstylist began pinning up the final curls in my hair, can you check to see if the makeup artist has any champagne tones in her kit? I'm thinking a warmer eye look than we originally planned. Elle raised an eyebrow. Any particular reason? I smiled, feeling stronger by the minute. Champagne photographs beautifully against white. I want to make sure I'm glowing in every picture, especially the ones Victoria manages to insert herself into. Elle grinned, recognizing the subtle countermove. Brilliant. Outshine her at her own game. Exactly, I nodded. Victoria wants to wear white to my wedding? Fine. Let's make sure everyone remembers who the real bride is. As my makeup was completed, now with warm champagne tones that made my eyes sparkle and my skin glow, Carolina peeked out the window at the gathering. Guests! Victoria's working the crowd, she reported. Doing a full circuit of the garden, making sure everyone sees her dress. Your mother's right beside her, introducing her to Emilio's extended family. I nodded, remaining calm. Of course she is. Victoria needs witnesses for her grand gesture to have the desired effect. While the hairstylist put the finishing touches on my updo, weaving in delicate pearl pins that matched my dress, I outlined the next phase of our strategy. Elle, I need you to find Christopher and Alex, I said, referring to Emilio's brother and another groomsman. They're both excellent Photographers with those fancy phones they're always showing off. Ask them to take candid shots throughout the ceremony and reception, casual ones that guests wouldn't recognize as deliberate documentation. What are we documenting? Elle asked, already reaching for her phone. Everything Victoria does, I explained. Her attempts to be in the spotlight, her reactions when those attempts fail, my mother enabling her. I want it all captured, but subtly. Not for revenge, but for clarity later. I've spent too many years being gaslit about Victoria's behavior. Carolina nodded in understanding. Evidence that can't be denied or rewritten. Exactly, I confirmed. My parents have always been able to dismiss my perspective as exaggeration or sensitivity. This time, I want objective proof of what actually happened. Ella texted quickly, then looked up with a satisfied smile. They're both on board. Christopher says, and I quote, "It would be my genuine pleasure to document Victoria's failure." I smiled, grateful for Emilio's family's understanding. They had witnessed Victoria's behavior at enough family gatherings to recognize the pattern, even without knowing our full history. What about the reception speeches? Carolina asked. Victoria's not scheduled to give one, but I wouldn't put it past her to grab the microphone anyway. I considered this. Victoria had a history of impromptu tributes that somehow always managed to center herself or include subtle digs at me. We need to control the microphone, I decided. Idris is the best man, and Elle is the maid of honor. They'll give their speeches as planned. Then my father will give his, followed immediately by the DJ starting the first dance. No opportunities for unexpected additions. I'll coordinate with the DJ, Elle promised. He's a friend from college. He'll be happy to keep the program tight, as... We finalized these details. Another knock came at the door. Carolina opened it to find Larry, Emilio's cousin, standing there with an unusually serious expression. Sorry to interrupt, he said, but I thought you should know. Victoria's talking about a special surprise she has planned for the reception. Something about a slideshow she put together as a gift for you and Emilio. My stomach dropped. This was exactly the kind of thing Victoria excelled at. Presenting something that appeared thoughtful on the surface, but was designed to undermine or embarrass. Did you get any details? I asked. Larry shook his head. Just that she gave something. To the AV guy when he was setting up earlier. Said it was approved by the bride's mother. Of course she had. My mother would have given her blessing without consulting me, assuming that whatever Victoria planned must be wonderful. Thank you for the heads up, I said. Can you find Idris and let him know? He'll know what to do. After Larry left, I turned to Elle and Carolina. We need to intercept that slideshow. Whatever it is, I guarantee it's either full of unflattering photos of me, embarrassing stories presented as charming memories, or excessive pictures of Victoria herself. On it, Elle said firmly. I know the AV technician. He did sound for my sister's wedding last year. I'll tell him there's been a mix-up and that the approved slideshow is coming from Idris. As Elle stepped out to make the call, Carolina helped me into my wedding dress, an elegant A-line with delicate lace sleeves and a sweetheart neckline. As she secured the long row of buttons down my back, I caught sight of myself in the full-length mirror and momentarily forgot about Victoria, the white dress, and all our counter-strategies. You look absolutely stunning, Carolina whispered, arranging the train behind me. I stared at my reflection, barely recognizing the confident, radiant woman looking back at me. This wasn't the hesitant, accommodating Ariana who typically shrank in Victoria's presence. This was someone stronger, someone who had found her voice and was prepared to use it. Thank you, I said, smoothing the satin bodice. For everything. Ella returned, her expression triumphant. Crisis averted. The AV guy deleted Victoria's slideshow and is expecting the real one from Idris within the hour. Perfect, I nodded. What about Ariana? My father's voice came from the doorway. He stood there in his tuxedo, his expression a complex mixture of pride, concern, and something else I couldn't quite identify. It's almost time. May I come in? I nodded, and he entered, closing the door behind him. For a moment, he simply looked at me, his eyes suspiciously bright. "You are absolutely beautiful," he said finally, his voice rough with emotion. "Thanks, Dad," I replied, searching his face for any sign of the conflict I knew must be brewing between his loyalty to my mother and his love for me. He cleared his throat. I understand there's been some discussion about Victoria's choice of attire today." I tensed, preparing for the usual request to accommodate my sister for the sake of family peace. "I want you to know," he continued, surprising me, "that I told her it was inappropriate. Your mother overruled me, as she often does where Victoria is concerned, but I want you to know I didn't approve." The admission, small as it was, of his powerlessness in the family dynamic left me momentarily speechless. "I also want you to know," he added, his voice stronger now, "that whatever you decide to do about it, I'll support you. This is your day, Ariana. Not Victoria's, not your mother's. Yours and Emilio's." I blinked back unexpected tears. "Thank you, Dad. That means more than you know." He nodded, seemingly embarrassed by his own forthrightness. "Emilio spoke with me earlier. He's a good man, strong. Reminds me of myself when I was younger, before I—" He trailed off, then squared his shoulders. "Well, before I learned the wrong lessons about keeping the peace." There was so much to unpack in that statement, but now wasn't the time. Instead, I squeezed his hand. "We have a plan. It doesn't involve confrontation, but Victoria won't be the center of attention either." He nodded, relief evident in his expression. "Good. Very good." He offered his arm. "Now, are you ready to get married?" I took one last look in the mirror, then smiled at my father. "More than ready." As we prepared to leave the bridal suite, Elle handed me my bouquet, a cascading arrangement of cream roses, burgundy dahlias, and greenery that perfectly complemented the fall setting. "Remember," she whispered, "no matter what Victoria tries, you're 10 steps ahead. This is your day, and we've got your back." With my father on one side and my trusted allies surrounding me, I stepped out of the bridal suite, ready to reclaim my wedding day. The walk from the bridal suite to the ceremony space gave me a clear view of the gathering guests. Victoria was impossible to miss in her white dress, positioning herself near the entrance where everyone would see her as they arrived. My mother stood beside her, graciously accepting compliments meant for the mother of the bride, while Victoria soaked up the attention from confused guests who weren't sure if her attire was somehow planned. My father felt me tense as we approached. A side entrance that would keep me hidden until the ceremony began. "Steady," he murmured. "Remember your plan." I took a deep breath and nodded. Our strategy wouldn't work if I showed any sign of being affected by Victoria's stunt. The key was to appear completely unbothered, as if her wearing white was so insignificant that I hadn't even noticed. Idris met us at the side entrance, his expression brightening when he saw me. "Everything's in place," he confirmed quietly. "Emilio's waiting at the altar, photographer has been briefed, and the seating has been subtly rearranged." "Victoria?" I asked. "Currently being escorted to her new seat by Christopher and Alex," Idris reported with barely concealed satisfaction. "Second row, partially blocked by my Uncle Luis, who is, as you know, built like a linebacker." "And my mother?" I asked. "Unhappy about the seating change but couldn't object without making a scene," my father answered. "Your Aunt Julia stepped in and insisted on sitting with them, which helped smooth things over." I smiled gratefully. Aunt Julia was my mother's older sister and one of the few people whose opinion she actually respected. "The guests are almost all seated," Idris continued. "You have about 5 minutes before the processional begins." Elle and Carolina joined us, making final adjustments to my veil and train. "Remember," Elle said, "when you walk down that aisle, focus only on Emilio. Don't let your eyes wander to Victoria or your mother. Act as if they're just any other guests. And if Victoria tries to catch your attention or make a comment as you pass, Carolina added, just keep that serene smile in place. Nothing she does is worth acknowledging. I nodded, feeling surprisingly calm. The initial shock and hurt of Victoria's white dress had been replaced by a steady determination. For once, I wasn't reacting emotionally to her provocation. I was responding strategically. Places, everyone, the wedding coordinator called softly. We're ready to begin. Elle and Carolina lined up first, followed by my father and me. As music started and the doors to the garden ceremony space opened. I took one last deep breath. Ready, sweetheart? My father asked. Absolutely, I answered, and I meant it. The processional music swelled as Elle and Carolina walked down the aisle, elegant in their burgundy bridesmaid dresses. Then the bridal march began, and all eyes turned toward me. As I stepped into view on my father's arm, I heard the collective intake of breath from the assembled guests. I kept my gaze forward, focused solely on Emilio, who stood waiting for me at the altar. The love and pride in his expression were like a balm, washing away any remaining anxiety. As we passed the second row, I sensed rather than saw Victoria shift in her seat, clearly annoyed at being partially hidden behind Emilio's. Large uncle? From the corner of my eye, I caught my mother's tight expression. She had undoubtedly expected Victoria to be showcased in the front row, her white dress a visual disruption to my bridal entrance. But from where most guests were seated, Victoria was barely visible. The strategic placement had reduced her attempted statement to background noise, exactly as we'd planned. When we reached the altar, my father placed my hand in Emilio's with a meaningful nod to my soon-to-be husband. The message was clear. He was officially transferring his protective role to Emilio, trusting him to stand with me against future storms. You're breathtaking, Emilio whispered as we turned to face the officiant, and you're glowing with something. That looks suspiciously like victory. I suppressed a smile, squeezing his hand in silent acknowledgement. The ceremony proceeded perfectly. We exchanged heartfelt vows that spoke of partnership, respect, and unwavering support. When the officiant declared us husband and wife, Emilio's kiss was both tender and triumphant, a public declaration of our union and strength together. As we turned to face our guests as a married couple, I allowed myself one brief glance toward Victoria. She sat rigidly in the second row, her expression tightly controlled but her eyes blazing with frustration. Her grand entrance in white had been completely overshadowed by the actual bride. The photographer had, as instructed, focused exclusively on the ceremony in the front row where Emilio's family sat, leaving Victoria's presence largely undocumented. Even better, several female guests had, by pure coincidence, chosen to wear pale dresses in cream, ivory, and blush tones. Victoria's white dress, rather than standing out as a shocking breach of etiquette, simply blended in with the general wedding palette. As we processed back down the aisle, I maintained the serene, joyful expression of a bride entirely focused on her new husband. When we passed Victoria's row, I heard her strained voice. Congratulations, sister dear. I'll join you for photos in a moment. Without breaking stride or acknowledging her comment, Emilio and I continued toward the garden. Exit. Our lack of response was deliberate, neither confrontational nor accommodating, just calmly proceeding with our day as planned. In the private moment we shared in the garden before photos began, Emilio pulled me close. Phase 1 complete, he murmured against my hair. Victoria's white dress stunt is falling completely flat. She'll try something else, I warned, knowing my sister wouldn't give up so easily. This was just her opening move. And we'll be ready, he assured me. But for now, let's enjoy this moment. We're married, Ariana. We've officially started our life together, and nothing Victoria does can change that. As we rejoined our wedding party for photos, I caught Elle's subtle thumbs up. The surface surrender, appearing to ignore Victoria's provocation rather than confronting it directly, had worked perfectly. Victoria had expected either an emotional confrontation or visible distress from me. By giving her neither, we'd denied her the reaction she craved. Now we moved to the next phase of our strategy, controlling the narrative of our wedding day, despite Victoria's determined attempts to insert herself into it. "Wedding party, let's gather by the rose arbor," called the photographer, Emilio's cousin-in-law Sophia. "Bride and groom in the center, bridesmaids to the left, groomsmen to the right." As we arranged ourselves for the first formal photos, Victoria appeared, walking briskly across the lawn with my mother hurrying behind her. "We're ready for family photos," Victoria announced, smoothing her white dress with deliberate movements. "Actually," Sophia said pleasantly, checking her shot list, "we're doing wedding party photos first, then immediate family. We'll call you when it's time." Victoria's smile faltered slightly. "But Mother and I are already here. Surely it makes sense to include us now and save time." Before I could respond, Emilio stepped in smoothly. "We're following the schedule we finalized last week," he said, his tone polite but firm. "Family photos will be in about 20 minutes near the fountain. We'll make an announcement when we're ready." My mother frowned. "Victoria and I came all the way over here. It seems inefficient to make us walk back and forth." "The lighting is different at each location," Sophia explained professionally. "We selected specific spots for each grouping to take advantage of the natural light. The fountain area will be perfect for family portraits in about 20 minutes when the sun shifts." The explanation was partially true. Sophia had indeed chosen optimal lighting for each set of photos, but the scheduling had been deliberately arranged to compartmentalize Victoria's presence. "Perhaps we could wait here and observe," my mother suggested. "Actually," Elle interjected, "we need this space clear for the large wedding party shots. Maybe you could enjoy some refreshments at the reception tent? The servers just put out the champagne and hors d'oeuvres for guests." Victoria's eyes narrowed slightly, recognizing she was being managed but unable to object without seeming unreasonable. After all, everything being said was perfectly logical and polite. "Fine," she said with forced brightness. "We'll see you at the fountain in 20 minutes. Don't start without us." As Victoria and my mother walked away, I caught the subtle exchange of satisfied glances among our wedding party. The framework we'd established was working. Victoria was being handled firmly, but with such politeness that she couldn't create conflict without appearing to be the aggressor. "Nice work," I murmured to Elle and Emilio. "Just getting started," Ella replied with a wink. The wedding party photos went smoothly, with Sophia capturing beautiful shots of Emilio and me with our closest friends. When it came time for family photos, we moved to the fountain area as promised, where Victoria and my mother were waiting. "Finally," Victoria said, with a theatrical sigh. "We've been waiting forever." "Right on schedule, actually," Sophia corrected, pleasantly, checking her watch. "Now, let's start with the bride and groom with the bride's parents." She positioned my parents on either side of Emilio and me, carefully arranging everyone for the best composition. Victoria stood to the side, clearly expecting to be included in the next shot. "Perfect," Sophia said after taking several photos. "Now, the bride and groom with the groom's parents, please." Victoria's smile froze. "What about me? Aren't you doing siblings next?" "We're doing parents first, then siblings," Sophia explained, already motioning for Emilio's parents to join us. "You'll be in the next set, don't worry." It was a small adjustment to the usual photo sequence, but an effective one. Instead of Victoria being featured early in the family portraits, she was being made to wait while other family combinations were photographed. When it was finally time for sibling photos, Sophia called both Victoria and Emilio's brother Christopher together. "Let's have both siblings with the bride and groom, please." Victoria's attempt to have a special sisters photo, which would have showcased her white dress beside mine, was neatly circumvented by grouping her with Christopher in all the sibling shots. In the resulting photos, Victoria's white dress was partially blocked in every frame, either by Christopher's taller form or by careful positioning that kept Emilio and me in the foreground. Throughout the photo session, we maintained a framework of polite efficiency. Every time Victoria tried to suggest special poses or groupings, Sophia referred to her finalized shot list and kept things moving. When Victoria attempted to position herself prominently, Sophia would make small adjustments. Let's shift you slightly to the right for better light balance. That effectively minimized the impact of her white dress. By the time we finished photos and headed to the reception tent, Victoria's frustrated expression told me she was beginning to realize her plan wasn't working as expected. Instead of creating drama or upstaging me, she had been politely but firmly managed into a supporting role. At the reception entrance, another element of our framework awaited. Instead of the traditional receiving line where Victoria could have positioned herself prominently beside me, we had arranged for guests to find their tables first while Emilio and I made our grand entrance after everyone was seated. "But how will you greet everyone properly?" my mother objected when she realized there would be no receiving line. "We'll visit each table during dinner," Emilio explained. "It's more personal that way and gives us a chance to actually speak with everyone rather than just a quick handshake." Again, the reasoning was sound enough that my mother couldn't argue without seeming difficult. As guests filed into the reception tent, directed by ushers to their assigned tables, I caught sight of Victoria scanning the seating chart with growing dismay. "Is something wrong?" I asked innocently, approaching with Emilio at my side. "We're at table 7, Victoria said, her voice tight. "That's practically in the back corner." "That's the family table," I confirmed. "We wanted you to be able to relax and enjoy yourselves without feeling like you were on display." It was perfectly true. We had wanted them out of display, just not for the reasons Victoria might assume. "But Mother always sits at the head table at family events," Victoria pressed. "This isn't a traditional head table arrangement," Emilio explained smoothly. "It's just Ariana and me with our wedding party. All parents and siblings are at family tables. My parents are at table 6, right next to yours." Once again, we had established a framework that was logical and fair, yet effectively neutralized Victoria's attempts to claim the spotlight. The family table was indeed positioned toward the back of the tent, partially screened by a large floral arrangement that would make Victoria's white dress less noticeable to the majority of guests. "I see," Victoria said, her smile not reaching, her eyes. "How modern of you." "We thought so," I agreed pleasantly. "Now, if you'll excuse us, we need to check in with the coordinator before our entrance." As we walked away, Emilio squeezed my hand. "You're doing brilliantly," he whispered. "Have I mentioned how much I adore this calm, strategic side of you?" I smiled up at him, feeling a growing confidence. "It's amazing what you can accomplish when you stop reacting and start planning." By establishing a clear framework for every aspect of the reception, seating arrangements, photo sequences, greeting protocols, we had created an environment where Victoria's attempts to disrupt or overshadow were consistently thwarted by seemingly reasonable logistics. Nothing could be attributed to spite or retaliation. Everything had practical justifications that no one, not even my mother, could reasonably object to. As we prepared for our grand entrance as Mr. and Mrs. Vega, I felt a newfound sense of control. For once, Victoria would have to play by our rules on our terms, and she was quickly realizing it. "Ladies and gentlemen," the DJ announced as the reception was fully underway, "please welcome for the first time as husband and wife, Mr. and Mrs. Emilio Vega." We entered to enthusiastic applause, immediately moving into our first dance. Emilio held me close as we swayed to our chosen song, his eyes never leaving mine. "Victoria looks like she's swallowed something unpleasant," he murmured, just loud enough for me to hear. I resisted the urge to look in her direction. Let her stew. This moment is ours. As the dance ended, the DJ invited my father to join me for the father-daughter dance. My dad stepped forward, taking my hand with surprising emotion in his eyes. "I'm proud of you," he said quietly as we began to move across the dance floor. "You've handled today with remarkable grace." "Thank you for supporting me," I replied. "It means more than you know." "I haven't always done right by you when it comes to Victoria," he admitted, his voice low enough that only I could hear. "Your mother and we fell into patterns that weren't fair to you." The unexpected acknowledgement caught me off guard. "Dad, we don't have to talk about this now." "No, but I want you to know I see it," he insisted. "And seeing you today, standing your ground without creating conflict, it's shown me another way." As our dance concluded, I noticed Victoria approach the DJ's table, leaning in to speak with him. Moments later, the DJ announced, "And now, a special sister dance requested by the bride's sister, Victoria." I felt a momentary panic. This wasn't part of our carefully planned program. Victoria was improvising, trying to create her own moment in the spotlight. As she approached us on the dance floor, her white dress gleaming under the reception lights, I saw the triumph in her eyes. She thought she'd found a way around our careful management. Before I could respond, Emilio was beside me. "What a lovely idea," he said smoothly. "A family dance. Christopher, Alex, bring your partners too. Let's make this a true celebration of both our families coming together." Within moments, the dance floor filled with not just Victoria and me, but Emilio's brother, his cousins, and their partners. What Victoria had intended as an intimate sister moment became a group dance that once again diluted her attempt to share. "The bridal spotlight." "Well played," I whispered to Emilio as we rejoined the group dance. Victoria's face tightened, but she maintained her smile for the watching guests. As we moved around the dance floor, she maneuvered closer to me. "You look beautiful," she said, her voice carrying just enough for nearby guests to hear. "Though I've always thought white washed you out a bit. You should have considered ivory like mine. It's more flattering for our complexion." The deliberate dig was designed to provoke me, to make me either acknowledge her dress was white, and therefore inappropriate, or appear petty if I objected to her compliment. "Thank you," I replied pleasantly. "I'm just so happy everyone's enjoying themselves. The caterer tells me the appetizers have been a huge hit." Victoria blinked, wrong-footed by my non-response to her provocation. Before she could regroup, the song ended, and the DJ immediately transitioned. "And now dinner is served. Please return to your tables as our servers bring out the first course." As the dance floor cleared, Victoria caught my arm. "Very clever, sister dear," she said, her voice low, "using Emilio's family to crowd me out. But there are still the speeches to come, and Mother made sure I'm on the list." So that was her next move. An impromptu speech that would likely be filled with backhanded compliments and sisterly stories designed to embarrass me. I had expected something like this, but hearing her confirm it still sent a flutter of anxiety through me. I maintained my calm expression. "How thoughtful of you to want to speak. I'm sure whatever you have to say will be lovely." Victoria's smile turned smug as she interpreted my response as resignation. She thought she'd finally found a way to claim her moment, one I couldn't politely circumvent or dilute with group activities. As Victoria returned to her table, clearly satisfied that she'd secured her victory, Elle appeared at my side. "Victoria's planning to give a speech," I informed her quietly. "I heard," Elle nodded. "Don't worry, it's handled." "How?" "The DJ has strict instructions that only the individuals on the official list are permitted to speak," Elle explained. "That's Idris as best man, me as maid of honor, and your father. No exceptions, even if the mother of the bride requests it." "And if Victoria tries to grab the microphone anyway?" I asked. "The DJ will cut the sound," Ellie assured me. "He's fully briefed and completely on board." Apparently, his sister dealt with something similar at her wedding. Relief washed over me. Once again, we had anticipated Victoria's move and prepared a counter strategy. Throughout dinner, I noticed Victoria speaking intently with my mother, occasionally, glancing in my direction with barely concealed anticipation. They both clearly believed they had found the perfect opportunity for Victoria to reclaim the attention she craved. When the time came for speeches, Idris stood first, delivering a heartfelt and humorous toast that had the room alternately laughing and wiping away tears. Elle followed with an equally moving tribute to our friendship and her happiness at welcoming Emilio to our circle. As my father rose to give the final speech, I saw Victoria shift in her seat, likely preparing to approach the microphone next. My mother patted her hand encouragingly. My father's speech was unexpectedly emotional. He spoke of watching me grow from a thoughtful child into a determined woman, of his admiration for the relationship Emilio and I had built, and his confidence in our future together. To Ariana and Emilio, he concluded, raising his glass, may your partnership continue to be a source of strength and joy for you both. As the guests applauded and raised their glasses, the DJ smoothly transitioned. And now, the newlyweds invite you all to join them on the dance floor. The music started immediately, effectively closing the speech portion of the evening. From across the room, I saw Victoria half risen from her seat, confusion and anger flashing across her face as she realized her opportunity had passed. My mother was already approaching the DJ, who politely but firmly shook his head. Victoria had believed she'd found the perfect opportunity to insert herself into our wedding narrative. She had expected to stand before all our guests in her white dress, delivering carefully crafted remarks that would appear loving on the surface while subtly undermining me. She had anticipated having photos and videos of this moment, documentation of her successful intrusion into our special day. Instead, she found herself once again outmaneuvered, her false victory evaporating before her eyes. As guests flooded the dance floor, the momentum of the reception carrying forward without her planned disruption, Victoria remained at her table, the frustration evident in her rigid posture and tightly controlled expression. Mission accomplished, Emilio murmured as we welcomed guests to the dance floor. Speech crisis averted. I smiled, genuinely enjoying the moment. She's not done yet. This will only make her more determined. Let her try, Emilio said confidently. We've thought of everything. As the evening progressed, I kept Victoria in my peripheral vision, watching for her next attempt. The calm determination I felt surprised me. In the past, anticipating Victoria's manipulations had filled me with anxiety. Now, I felt prepared and protected, surrounded by allies who understood the situation and were committed to preserving our special day. As the dancing continued, I caught sight of Victoria in what appeared to be an intense conversation with the wedding coordinator near the entrance to the tent. My mother hovered nearby, nodding vigorously at whatever Victoria was saying. Elle, I murmured, nudging my friend as we took a brief break from dancing. By the entrance, Victoria's got Margaret cornered. Elle glanced over discreetly. I'm on it, she said, smoothly making her way toward them with 2 champagne flutes in hand. I watched as she approached the group, offering drinks as a pretext to insert herself into the conversation. Though I couldn't hear what was being said, I could read the body language well enough. Victoria's gestures were animated, Margaret looked uncomfortable, and my mother was using her authoritative, "This is how things will be done" posture that had intimidated service providers throughout my childhood. Within moments, Idris appeared. Beside them, likely summoned by a text from Elle. He placed a friendly hand on Margaret's shoulder, effectively creating a buffer between her and my mother and sister. After a brief exchange, Victoria stalked away, my mother following with a disgruntled expression. Elle and Idris returned to our table, looking pleased with themselves. What was that about? I asked. Victoria was trying to arrange a surprise cake cutting, Elle explained. She told Margaret that you had confided in her that you wanted to move it up in the schedule, but were too shy to ask. I raised an eyebrow. And Margaret believed that? She was skeptical, Idris admitted. But your mother was backing Victoria up, insisting it was what you really wanted, despite the agreed schedule. What was Victoria's angle? Emilio asked, joining our conversation. From what we gathered, Elle continued, she was planning to make an announcement and toast right before the cake cutting. Since it would be a spontaneous moment, our speech restrictions wouldn't apply. Clever, I acknowledged grudgingly. Victoria had identified a potential loophole in our careful planning. How did you handle it? Idris grinned. I reminded Margaret that as wedding coordinator, she's contractually bound to follow the timeline approved by the people who signed her contract, which would be you and Emilio, not Victoria or your mother. And I sweetened the deal, Ella added, by mentioning that several of Emilio's family members are professional photographers who would be sure to tag her company in all their social media posts about this beautiful wedding, as long as everything goes according to the approved plan. I shook my head, impressed by their quick thinking. You two are incredible. We're just getting started, Elle assured me. While I was over there, I got some intel from one of the servers. Apparently, Victoria cornered him earlier and slipped him $50 to make sure her champagne glass is always full for the toast later. Why would she need to ensure she has champagne? Emilio asked, frowning. Everyone will have champagne for the toasts. Because, I realized, connecting the dots, she's planning to make her own toast after the cake cutting, when everyone already has full glasses. Exactly. Elle nodded. She can't get the microphone during the official toast portion, so she's planning to create her own moment once everyone has champagne in hand. So, what's our counter move? I asked. Already handling it, Idris assured me. I've spoken with the serving staff. They'll ensure Victoria's glass is filled with sparkling cider, not champagne. Nothing obvious, just a subtle precaution in case she gets emotional. The thoughtfulness of this preventative measure touched me. My friends weren't just helping me avoid Victoria's disruptions. They were also ensuring she wouldn't embarrass herself too severely if her frustration led to excessive drinking. As we finalized these behind-the-scenes adjustments, Christopher approached our table, his expression both amused and concerned. Heads up, he said quietly. Victoria just requested the photographer take special sister portraits by the garden lights. She's telling everyone it was your idea. Something about capturing the sister bond on your special day. I suppressed a sigh. Another attempt to get photos highlighting her in her white dress beside me and mine. Did Sophia agree? I asked. She said she needed to check with you first, Christopher reported. Victoria wasn't happy about that. She's waiting by the garden entrance with your mother. I considered our options. Refusing outright would create the scene Victoria was likely hoping for at this point, a confrontation she could paint as me being an unreasonable, selfish bride. But agreeing would give her exactly what she'd been trying to get all day, photos showcasing her inappropriate attire alongside me. Actually, Emilio interjected thoughtfully, I have an idea. He quickly outlined his suggestion, which was so perfectly balanced between accommodation and strategic undermining that I couldn't help but laugh. That's brilliant, I agreed. Christopher, can you let Sophia know we'll do the garden photos in 15 minutes? And ask her to bring her colored lighting gels. Christopher grinned, immediately understanding our plan. With pleasure. As he left to coordinate with the photographer, Carolina rejoined our table. Victoria's getting desperate, she reported. I overheard her telling your cousins that she's wearing white because of some secret pact between you two. Something about honoring your grandmother. My grandmother who specifically left me her blue sapphire necklace that I'm wearing right now? I asked incredulously, touching the pendant at my throat. The very same, Carolina confirmed. She's rewriting history in real time, trying to justify her outfit. But most people aren't buying it. I've heard at least 3 guests commenting on how inappropriate it is to wear white to someone else's wedding. Let her dig herself deeper, Elle advised. The more she tries to explain, the more obvious her intentions become. As our conversation continued, I noticed Victoria making her way toward our table, determination in every step. She had clearly decided on a direct approach, after her various behind-the-scenes manipulations had been thwarted. "Ariana, darling," she called as she approached, her voice carrying just enough to attract attention from nearby tables. "I've been trying to catch you all evening. Don't you want any pictures with your only sister on your special day?" The question was perfectly calculated. Refusing would make me appear petty in front of the watching guests. Agreeing would give her the photo opportunity she'd been angling for all day. "Actually," I smiled, rising to meet her. "Emilio and I were just discussing that. We've arranged for garden photos in 15 minutes. The photographer is setting up special lighting." Victoria's expression shifted from surprise to smug satisfaction. She thought she'd finally worn me down, that she'd finally get her moment in the bridal spotlight. "Wonderful," she exclaimed, clearly pleased with what she perceived as her victory. "Mother will be so happy. She's been saying we need sister photos all day." "I'm sure she has," I replied pleasantly. "Why don't you tell her we'll meet you both by the garden entrance in 15 minutes? Sophia is preparing something really special with the lighting." As Victoria hurried away to inform my mother of her apparent success, Emilio squeezed my hand under the table. "Ready for Phase 8? He murmured. I nodded, feeling a strange combination of anticipation and calm confidence. "Absolutely." Victoria thinks she's finally getting her victory photo in her white dress next to the bride. She has no idea what we actually have planned. The covert preparations we'd made throughout the evening were about to serve their purpose. Victoria believed she was finally breaking through our defenses, unaware that we had anticipated this move and prepared accordingly. Her perceived victory was about to become yet another carefully managed disappointment. 15 minutes later, we gathered at the garden entrance. Victoria arrived triumphantly with my mother, both looking pleased that they had finally secured the photo opportunity. Victoria had been angling for all evening. "This lighting is perfect," Sophia enthused as she directed us toward the garden path lined with twinkling string lights. "I'm going to use some special colored gels to create a unique atmosphere for these night portraits." "Colored gels?" my mother questioned, her brow furrowing slightly. "Won't that affect how the dresses look in the photos?" "That's exactly the point," Sophia explained enthusiastically. "The colored lighting will create a dramatic artistic effect. Very editorial, very modern." I suppressed a smile, knowing exactly what Sophia was planning. The colored gels would effectively transform the appearance of our dresses in the photographs. Victoria's white gown, which she had chosen specifically to rival mine, would appear tinted in the final images, perhaps blue or purple or whatever color Sophia selected. The white she had been so determined to showcase would be completely altered. "I'm not sure that's necessary," Victoria interjected, clearly catching on to the potential consequence. "Natural lighting would better capture the details of our dresses, don't you think?" "Oh, but we've already taken all the natural light photos earlier," I said innocently. "These are meant to be artistic, dramatic, something special and different. To end the night." Sophia nodded in agreement. "Exactly. Now let's position you both here, with the garden lights creating a bokeh effect behind you." As Victoria reluctantly took her place beside me, I saw her scanning for any way to preserve her white dress in the photos. But Sophia was already setting up, attachments on her camera and portable lights positioned with colored filters. "Perhaps we should take a few with standard lighting first," my mother suggested, sensing Victoria's discomfort. "We're losing the optimal light for this shot," Sophia replied professionally. "If we want to capture this special moment between the sisters, we need to work quickly with the current setup." Victoria was trapped. She could either refuse the photos entirely, thus making her earlier insistence on sister pictures seem obviously disingenuous, or proceed with the colored lighting that would negate the impact of her white dress. Fine, she conceded tightly. Let's do it. The resulting photos were exactly as planned. Under purple and blue lighting gels, both our dresses appeared similarly tinted, completely neutralizing Victoria's attempt to visually align herself as a second bride. In some shots, her white dress actually appeared more purple than mine. Due to the way the fabric reflected the colored light, these are going to be stunning, Sophia assured us as she reviewed the shots on her camera. Very artistic. Victoria peered at the preview screen, her expression falling as she saw how the lighting had transformed her carefully chosen white dress. They're unique, she managed, clearly disappointed but unable to object without revealing her true motivations. Thank you for suggesting these special sister portraits, Victoria, I said warmly, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. It means a lot to have these artistic shots to remember the day. Victoria's jaw tightened at having her plan so thoroughly subverted, but with witnesses present, she had no choice but to play along. Of course, she replied with a strained smile. Anything for my sister on her big day. As we returned to the reception, Emilio met us at the entrance, offering me his arm. Everything go well? He asked, though his knowing smile suggested he'd already heard from Sophia. Perfectly, I confirmed. Very colorful. Inside the tent, I noticed the staff preparing for the cake-cutting ceremony. According to our schedule, this would be followed by more dancing and then the bouquet toss before the evening concluded. Each element had been carefully planned to minimize opportunities for Victoria's interference. Heads up, Carolina murmured as she passed us on her way to the restroom. Victoria's been talking to the DJ again. I couldn't hear what about, but she seemed insistent. I exchanged glances with Emilio. She's getting desperate, I observed. We've countered every move so far. Which makes her unpredictable, he cautioned. We should be prepared for something more direct. Elle approached, having overheard our conversation. Already on it, she assured us. I've asked Larry and Alex to keep an eye on her. If she heads toward the DJ booth or the microphone again, they'll create a diversion. What kind of diversion? I asked, somewhat concerned. Elle grinned. Larry's prepared to have a minor medical situation. Nothing serious, just enough to draw attention. He was a theater major, remember? I shook my head, amazed at the lengths. Our friends were willing to go to protect our day. Let's hope it doesn't come to that. Also, Elle continued, lowering her voice, I've asked the catering manager to ensure all champagne service for the rest of the night is handled by staff only, no self-service, just in case Victoria decides to use her glass for an impromptu toast. This careful risk mitigation, anticipating Victoria's potential disruptions and establishing countermeasures, had been key to maintaining control of our wedding day. Where Victoria was used to improvising ways to claim attention, we had systematically closed off her avenues for disruption, all while maintaining a veneer of perfect hospitality. As the cake cutting approached, I watched Victoria conferring intensely with my mother near the dessert table. Their frequent glances in my direction confirmed they were planning something. She's not giving up, I murmured to Emilio as we prepared to be called over for the cake cutting. Then neither are we, he replied simply. The DJ announced the cake cutting ceremony, inviting Emilio and me to the beautifully decorated table where our three-tiered cake awaited. As we took our positions, I noticed Victoria maneuvering closer, positioning herself directly in the photographer's line of sight. Sophia, however, was well prepared. She smoothly adjusted her angle, ensuring Victoria was excluded from the primary shots. Meanwhile, one of the servers, clearly briefed by Elle, strategically positioned himself with a tray of champagne glasses, effectively creating a barrier between Victoria and the cake table. The cake cutting proceeded perfectly, with Emilio and I carefully feeding each other small bites as tradition dictated. When the moment came for the champagne toast that traditionally followed, the DJ made a seemingly spontaneous announcement. Before we continue with the toasts, the bride and groom have prepared a special thank you video for their wedding party. and families. If we could dim the lights for the presentation? This was another protective measure we had arranged, a brief video montage of photos of us with our wedding party and families, set to music. The timing was deliberate, creating a structured transition that prevented Victoria from seizing the moment after the cake cutting for her own purposes. As the lights dimmed and the video began playing on the screen that had been set up at the front of the tent, I saw Victoria's frustrated expression illuminated by the changing images. She had been positioning herself to make some kind of announcement or toast following the cake cutting, but once again found herself outmaneuvered by our careful planning. "Nice touch with the video," I whispered to Emilio as our smiling faces appeared on screen. "I can't take credit for that one," he admitted. Idris and Elle added it to the schedule this afternoon when they realized Victoria might try something during the cake cutting. The depth of our friends' commitment to protecting our day touched me deeply. They had thought of contingencies I hadn't even considered, closing potential vulnerabilities before Victoria could exploit them. As the video concluded and the regular reception activities resumed, I felt a growing confidence. We had anticipated and countered Victoria's every move, mitigating each risk with careful planning and the support of our loyal friends. The white dress that should have been her trump card had been systematically neutralized throughout the day. For the first time in our long history of conflict, I was winning. Not through confrontation or drama, but through strategic foresight and the strength of the genuine relationships Emilio and I had built. As the evening progressed toward its final scheduled events, I found myself experiencing an unusual sense of calm. Normally, Victoria's escalating attempts to disrupt would have left me anxious and on edge, constantly bracing for her next move. Instead, I felt centered and collected, even slightly amused by the growing desperation of her efforts. Emilio and I circulated among our guests, accepting congratulations and sharing brief conversations. Each time we approached a table where Victoria was present, she would straighten, clearly preparing for some kind of confrontation or dramatic moment. But we simply included her in the general conversation before moving on to the next group. Never giving her the opportunity for the public scene she seemed increasingly determined to create. "She's watching us like a hawk," Emilio noted as we moved between tables, "waiting for an opening." "Let her watch," I replied, surprising myself with my confidence. "We've countered every move so far. We can handle whatever comes next." This composed anticipation, this readiness without anxiety, felt like a breakthrough. All my life, interactions with Victoria had been characterized by tension and dread, never knowing when or how she would attempt to undermine me, but always certain that she would. Now, for the first time, I was not just reacting to her manipulations, but actively anticipating and neutralizing them. During a brief moment alone with Ella while Emilio spoke with some colleagues, I confessed this revelation. "I've never felt this calm dealing with Victoria before," I told her. "Usually by now I'd be a bundle of nerves, wondering what she'll try next." Elle smiled knowingly. "That's because you've taken back control. You're not at her mercy anymore." She was right. Throughout my life, I had been conditioned to believe I had only two options when faced with Victoria's behavior: direct confrontation, which inevitably painted me as the difficult one, or silent endurance, which allowed her to continue unchecked. Today, we had demonstrated there was a third path: strategic management that neither confronted nor conceded. As we approached the final hour of the reception, I could see Victoria growing visibly frustrated. Her white dress, which she had expected to be a show-stopping statement, had been reduced to a minor background detail through our careful management of photos, seating, and lighting. Her attempts to insert herself into key moments had been consistently thwarted by our prepared countermeasures. "The bouquet toss is coming up soon," Carolina reminded me as we passed on the dance floor. "Victoria's been telling people she has a feeling she's going to catch it." I laughed softly. "Of course she has." The bouquet toss was traditionally a light-hearted moment, but I could easily imagine how Victoria might try to turn it into another opportunity to center herself. Perhaps by making an obvious aggressive play for the bouquet, or by using the moment to deliver some kind of speech if she caught it. "Don't worry," Carolina assured me, reading my thoughts. "Els recruited some ringers." Sure enough, when the DJ announced the bouquet toss and invited all single women to the dance floor, I noticed Elle had strategically positioned several of our most athletic friends in a loose circle around where Victoria stood in her white dress, clearly expecting to be given a clear path to the bouquet. As I turned my back to the assembled group, I heard the excited murmurs of anticipation. I counted to 3, then tossed my bouquet with a deliberate arc that sent it sailing toward the left side of the group, away from where Victoria had positioned herself. There was a flurry of movement as Victoria realized the bouquet wasn't coming toward her. She lunged across the circle, arms outstretched, but Elle's friend Ariana, a former college volleyball player, easily reached up and caught the bouquet with a graceful leap. Applause and cheers erupted as Ariana held the bouquet triumphantly. Aloft, Victoria stood frozen for a moment, her expression a mixture of disbelief and anger, before composing herself and offering stilted congratulations to the winner. As the music resumed and guests returned to dancing, I caught sight of Victoria in an intense conversation with my mother near the bar. Their gestures suggested an argument, with Victoria clearly agitated and my mother attempting to calm her. "Trouble in paradise," Idris observed, appearing at my side with a glass of water. "Victoria looks like she's about 2 minutes away from a full meltdown." "Should we be concerned?" I asked, watching as Victoria's gestures became more animated. "I wouldn't worry," Idris assured me. "Your father just headed over there, and he looks determined. I think he's finally reached his limit with the drama." "Sure. Enough." My father had approached my mother and Victoria, his expression unusually stern. Though I couldn't hear their conversation over the music, the body language told the story. My father spoke briefly but firmly, placing a restraining hand on Victoria's arm when she tried to interrupt. My mother looked surprised, then chastened. Victoria appeared mutinous but eventually subsided. "Well, that's interesting," I murmured. "I don't think I've ever seen my father stand up to both of them at once." "Maybe he's finally seen the pattern clearly," Emilio suggested, joining our observation. "Sometimes it takes an extreme example like today to recognize dysfunctional dynamics that have become normalized." As if sensing our attention, my father glanced in our direction. After saying something else to my mother and Victoria, he made his way toward us. "Ariana," he said quietly when he reached us, "I want to apologize. Victoria's behavior today has been unacceptable. I've informed her and your mother that if there are any further disruptions, I will personally escort them both out." I stared at him in astonishment. "Dad, you don't have to—" "Yes, I do," he interrupted firmly. "I should have done it hours ago. Years ago, if I'm being honest." He shook his head regretfully. "I've allowed this pattern to continue for too long, making excuses and keeping the peace at your expense. Not anymore." The unexpected support brought tears to my eyes. "Thank you," I managed. My father nodded, clearly uncomfortable with the emotional moment but determined nonetheless. "Enjoy the rest of your reception. Victoria has agreed to behave appropriately for what remains of the evening." As he returned to where my mother and a subdued-looking Victoria waited, Emilio squeezed my hand. "That was unexpected." "Completely," I agreed, blinking back tears. "In 32 years, I've never seen him take a definitive stand against Victoria's behavior." "Sometimes people surprise you," Idris observed. "Even parents." The DJ announced the last dance of the evening, inviting all couples to the floor. As Emilio led me to the center, I caught sight of Victoria seated at her table, still in her white dress but somehow diminished, the power of her statement outfit neutralized by our consistent strategic responses throughout the day. For the first Time, I felt genuine pity rather than frustration or anger. How exhausting it must be, I realized, to constantly seek external validation. To need to be the center of attention so desperately that you would undermine your own sister's wedding day. You're thinking about Victoria, Emilio observed as we swayed to the music. How can you tell? I asked. That little crease between your eyebrows, he said, gently smoothing it with his thumb. But it's different now. You look thoughtful, not stressed. I feel different, I admitted. Less reactive, more, I don't know, detached, in a healthy way. Emilio nodded, understanding. You've broken the pattern. That's what today was really about. Not just countering Victoria's white dress stunt, but changing how you respond to her manipulations. You've shown her that her usual tactics don't work anymore. As the final song ended and we prepared for our sparkler-lit exit from the reception, I felt a profound sense of transition. This wedding day had marked not just my legal union with Emilio, but a fundamental shift in how I engaged with my family's dynamics. The composed anticipation I had maintained throughout the day, never anxious, never reactive, always prepared, had changed something essential in the power balance between Victoria and me. Our sparkler exit was magical. A tunnel of light formed. By our cheering friends and family as Emilio and I ran hand in hand toward the vintage car that would take us to our hotel. Through the golden glow, I caught a glimpse of Victoria standing to the side, still in her white dress, but no longer commanding attention. Most guests were focused on us, their sparklers raised high, their faces alight with genuine joy for our happiness. As we settled into the back seat of the car, waving goodbye through the window, Emilio pulled me close. We did it, he murmured against my hair. Perfect wedding, despite everything. Not despite everything, I corrected him. With everything addressed and managed. He laughed softly. You're right, that's a much better way to look at it. The drive to the hotel was peaceful, a welcome respite after the emotional intensity of the day. We talked about our favorite moments, our vows, our first dance, the touching speeches from our friends, deliberately focusing on the positive aspects rather than Victoria's attempts at disruption. I keep thinking about my father, I admitted as we neared the hotel. I've never seen him stand up to Victoria and my mother like that before. Maybe seeing you handle things so differently gave him permission to try a new approach himself, Emilio suggested. You showed him another way. The thought was both heartening and sobering. The possibility that my father had been as trapped in the family dynamic as I had been, lacking the tools or courage to break the pattern until now. At the hotel, a bottle of champagne and chocolate-covered strawberries awaited us in our suite, a gift from Elle, Carolina, and Idris, with a note that read, "Congratulations on your wedding and on executing the perfect strategy. Love you both." I smiled, showing the note to Emilio. We have the best friends. We really do, he agreed, popping the champagne and filling 2 glasses. To us, he toasted, and to new beginnings. To us, I echoed, clinking my glass against his, and to healthier boundaries. As the excitement of the day began to fade into pleasant exhaustion, I checked my phone one last time before settling in for the night. There were numerous congratulatory messages from friends and family, but one text caught my attention. It was from my father, sent just minutes ago. Ariana, I'm sorry for not standing up for you sooner. Today was a wake-up call. Your mother and I had a long talk after we got home. Things will be different going forward. I'm proud of how you handled today. Sleep well, Dad. I showed the message to Emilio, surprisingly moved by my father's words. Do you think he means it? I asked. I think he wants to mean it, Emilio said thoughtfully. Whether he can follow through against years of established patterns, that remains to be seen. But it's a start. I nodded, setting my phone aside. A start is more than I expected. The first phase of our strategy had succeeded beyond what I had imagined possible. Not only had we prevented Victoria from hijacking our wedding with her white dress stunt, but we had potentially catalyzed a shift in the entire family dynamic. That's so. Following morning, we enjoyed a leisurely breakfast in our suite before checking out and heading to the airport for our honeymoon. As we waited in the departure lounge, my phone buzzed with a series of notifications. Elle posting photos from the wedding to our shared album. I scrolled through them, smiling at the joyful images of our ceremony and reception. Elle had carefully selected shots that showcased the beauty of the day while minimizing Victoria's presence. In the few photos where she was visible, her white dress somehow seemed unremarkable, just another outfit among the celebration. "Ella's a genius with the photo selection," I commented, showing Emilio the album. "Definitely," he agreed. "Though I'm curious to see what the official photos will look like, especially those special garden shots with the colored lighting." I laughed, remembering Victoria's poorly concealed dismay when she realized her white dress would be transformed by the colored gels. Sophia promised to send us some previews while we're away. Our honeymoon, 2 weeks in a secluded beach resort in Belize, was exactly what we needed after the intensity of the wedding planning and execution of our Victoria management strategy. Days filled with sunshine, swimming, and exploration. Evenings of intimate dinners and quiet talks under the stars. For the first time in months, I allowed myself to fully relax, setting aside thoughts of family dynamics and sister rivalries. It was during our second week there that the first sign appeared that our wedding day strategy had initiated lasting changes. My mother called one evening as Emilio and I were returning from dinner. "Ariana?" Her voice sounded tentative, lacking its usual authoritative tone. "I'm not interrupting your honeymoon, am I?" "We just finished dinner," I replied neutrally. "Is everything okay?" Yes, everything's fine," she assured me quickly. I wanted to talk to you about the wedding." I tensed slightly, exchanging glances with Emilio, who could hear her clearly in the quiet of our bungalow. "What about it?" I asked, keeping my voice even. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," my mother said, surprising me with her subdued tone. "And I owe you an apology. Victoria should never have worn white to your wedding, and I should never have defended her choice." The frank admission left me momentarily speechless. In all my years, I had rarely heard my mother acknowledge a mistake, particularly regarding Victoria. Thank you for saying that," I managed finally. "Your father has been quite firm about this," she continued. "He says we've enabled patterns that have hurt you, and he's right. I didn't see it clearly until now." I sat on the edge of the bed, processing her words. "What changed?" I asked. "You've always supported Victoria's behavior before." My mother sighed heavily. "Seeing how calmly you handled everything at the wedding, it made me realize how childish Victoria's behavior was by comparison. And then afterward, several of my friends commented on how inappropriate her dress was." Georgia. Evans even asked me directly why I had allowed it. So it had taken external judgment from her social circle to make my mother reconsider her position. That wasn't entirely surprising. She had always valued reputation and appearances. "I see," I said, unsure how to respond to this unexpected development. Victoria. "And I had a difficult conversation yesterday," my mother continued. "I told her that her behavior at the wedding was unacceptable and that I was wrong to support it. She didn't take it well?" "I imagine not," I replied, picturing Victoria's likely outrage at losing her most reliable ally. "She says I'm betraying her by taking your side," my mother admitted. "As if family relationships are about taking sides. Your father helped me see how that kind of thinking has damaged our family." This was the most insight my mother had ever shown about our family dynamics. I wasn't naive enough to believe one conversation signaled a complete transformation, but it was more acknowledgement than I had ever expected. "I hope you and Victoria can work things out," I said carefully. "But I appreciate you calling to apologize. It means a lot." After ending the call, I relayed the full conversation to Emilio, still somewhat stunned by my mother's unexpected apology. "The first domino falls," he observed. "Your father standing up at the wedding seems to have emboldened him to continue. At home?" "Apparently so," I agreed. "Though I'm not holding my breath for a complete family transformation. This could just be temporary damage control." Emilio nodded thoughtfully. "Possibly. But even if that's all it is, it's still a significant change from their usual pattern of ignoring or excusing Victoria's behavior." He was right. Whether my parents' new perspectives lasted or not, the established dynamic had been disrupted. Our wedding day strategy, the calm, systematic countering of Victoria's white dress stunt, had triggered the first genuine acknowledgement from my parents that something was wrong with how they had managed our family relationships. As we returned to our honeymoon activities the next day, I felt lighter somehow. Not because I believed all family issues were suddenly resolved, but because I had proven to myself that I could handle Victoria's manipulations without either confrontation or capitulation. I had found a third way, strategic management, and its success had rippled beyond the wedding day into the family system itself. The initial execution of our plan had worked perfectly at the wedding. Now its effects were continuing to unfold in ways I hadn't anticipated, creating opportunities for new patterns to emerge in my family relationships. Our return from the honeymoon marked the beginning of real life as a married couple. We settled into Emilio's apartment, soon to be ours together once my lease ended, and began the process of merging our lives, from kitchen utensils to financial accounts. These everyday tasks of building a shared life felt refreshingly normal after the drama surrounding our wedding. A week after our return, Elle hosted a small dinner party to welcome us home, gathering our closest friends to share honeymoon stories and wedding aftermath. "You should see Victoria's social media," Carolina reported as we enjoyed after-dinner drinks in LA's living room. "She's posted exactly 0 photos from your wedding, not even the professionally edited ones Sophia delivered last week. Because there isn't a single shot where her white dress stunt worked out as planned," Idris added with satisfaction. "Every photo either minimizes her presence or shows her dress altered by the colored lighting. Meanwhile," Ella continued, pulling out her phone, "she's been posting these melodramatic cryptic quotes about family betrayal and standing alone against hypocrisy." She showed me a recent post from Victoria, a moody black and white selfie, captioned with, "Sometimes the hardest lesson is learning who never deserved your loyalty in the first place. Our family isn't always blood. Hard truth will prevail." I shook my head, handing the phone back. Classic Victoria, recasting herself as the victim. "Has she contacted you directly?" Carolina asked. "Not a word," I confirmed. "Not since the wedding. My mother called during the honeymoon to apologize for supporting Victoria's white dress stunt, but Victoria herself has maintained radio silence." "That won't last," Elle predicted. "She's building up to something. This wounded victim narrative is just the warm-up." Ella's assessment proved accurate. 3 days later, I received a text from Victoria. "We need to talk. Coffee tomorrow?" The message was brief and direct, unusually so for Victoria, who typically wrapped her demands in elaborate justifications and emotional manipulation. I showed it to Emilio, considering my response. "What do you want to do?" he asked, careful not to influence my decision either way. I thought about it carefully. "I think I need to see what she has to say. Not immediately jumping to her summons, but not avoiding her either." I crafted a measured reply. "I'm busy tomorrow. I could do Saturday morning at Riverside Cafe if that works for you." Her response came quickly. "Fine. 10 a.m. The brief exchange was telling. Victoria usually insisted on arranging meetings at times and locations convenient for her, often with little regard for others' schedules. Her immediate acceptance of my suggested time and place suggested either unusual urgency or a new strategic approach on her part. "Be careful," Emilio cautioned when I showed him the exchange. This feels different from her usual tactics. I know, I agreed. That's partly why I think I should go. I want to see what this new approach is about. Do you want me to come with you? I could sit at another table, just be nearby if needed. I considered his offer, touched by his protectiveness. No, I think I need to handle this myself. But thank you for offering. Saturday morning arrived crisp and clear. I dressed casually but carefully. Comfortable jeans, a soft sweater, minimal, makeup. I wanted to project calm confidence rather than appearing either overly formal, suggesting I saw this as a significant confrontation, or too casual, which Victoria might interpret as disrespect. I arrived at Riverside Cafe 10 minutes early, selecting a table with a clear view of the entrance and ordering a latte while I waited. To my surprise, Victoria arrived precisely at 10 a.m., another departure from her usual habit of deliberate lateness. She looked different somehow, still impeccably dressed in designer clothes, still perfectly made up. But there was a tightness. Around her eyes, a slight tension in her movements that suggested stress or uncertainty. "Thanks for meeting me," she said, sliding into the seat across from me. Her tone was neutral, lacking both the saccharine sweetness she often employed in public and the sharp edge that typically characterized our private interactions. "Of course," I replied evenly. "What did you want to talk about?" Victoria ordered. "A black coffee," then turned back to me with unusual directness. "Things have been difficult since your wedding." I nodded but didn't immediately respond, curious to see where she would take this. "Mother and father have been different," she continued, a trace of resentment entering her voice. "Father's barely speaking to me, and mother—" She paused, clearly struggling with what to say next. "Mother actually criticized me. She's never done that before." "I see," I said simply. Victoria's eyes narrowed slightly at my neutral response. "This is what you wanted, isn't it? To turn them against me?" And there it was, the familiar accusation, the casting of herself as victim and me as manipulator. Some things hadn't changed after all. "No, Victoria," I replied calmly. "I didn't want anyone turned against anyone. I just wanted to enjoy my wedding day without it becoming about you." "It wasn't about me," she protested, her voice rising slightly before she caught herself, glancing around at the other cafe patrons. More quietly, she continued. "Wearing a light-colored dress to a wedding isn't a crime." "You wore white, Victoria," I stated plainly. "We both know it was deliberate." Victoria stared at me, seemingly thrown by my direct acknowledgement of what had normally been our family's pattern. Her provocations followed by my silence and everyone else's pretense that nothing untoward had happened. She began, then paused, recalibrating. "Fine, I wore white. But you didn't have to retaliate the way you did. Excluding me from photos, seating me in the back, using those ridiculous colored lights for our sister pictures." I took a sip of my latte, maintaining eye contact. "We didn't exclude you from anything. We simply managed our wedding day to minimize disruptions." "Disruptions?" Victoria repeated incredulously. "I'm your sister, not a disruption." "Sisters don't wear white to each other's weddings, Victoria," I said softly. "Sisters don't try to hijack special moments or insert themselves into the spotlight on someone else's day." Victoria's face flushed, anger and something else, perhaps embarrassment, coloring. Her cheeks. "You've always been jealous of the attention I receive," she countered. "Always painting yourself as the victim when you're just as competitive as I am." "Is that really what you believe?" I asked, genuinely curious about her perception. "That. My objection to you wearing white to my wedding was about jealousy or competition. What else would it be about?" she demanded. "Respect," I answered simply. "Basic courtesy. Recognizing that some days aren't about you." Victoria fell silent, her coffee untouched before her. For a moment, I thought I glimpsed uncertainty in her expression, a flicker of recognition that perhaps her perspective wasn't entirely accurate. But it passed quickly, replaced by a more familiar defensiveness. "Well, it doesn't matter now," she said dismissively. "What's done is done. I didn't come here to argue about the wedding anyway." "Why did you come?" I asked directly. Victoria fidgeted with her coffee cup, another uncharacteristic display of nervousness. "Mother and father are hosting their anniversary dinner next month. I wanted to make sure we could be civil to each other for their sake." The request seemed reasonable on the surface, but years of experience with Victoria had taught me to look deeper. "Just civil? Or are you asking for something else?" Her eyes met mine, calculating. "I think it would be better for everyone if we put this wedding incident behind us. Present a united front. Show the family that everything is normal again." And there it was. Not a request for genuine reconciliation, but a plea to return to the status quo, to the established dynamic where Victoria's behavior went unchallenged, and I accommodated her for the sake of family harmony. "I'm always civil." "Victoria," I replied carefully. "But if by normal you mean pretending your white dress at my wedding didn't happen, or that the pattern it represents is acceptable, then no. I won't do that anymore." Victoria's expression hardened. "So that's it? One incident? And you're willing to create a permanent family rift?" "This isn't about one incident," I said, keeping my voice steady. "It's about a lifetime of similar incidents. The white dress was just the most public example." "You're being dramatic," Victoria scoffed, falling back on a familiar dismissal. "That's always been your problem, turning minor disagreements into grand betrayals." I took a deep breath, recognizing the escalation strategy. Victoria was attempting to provoke an emotional response, to push me into either angry confrontation or defensive justification, both reactions that would shift power back to her. "No, Victoria," I replied, maintaining my calm. "I'm not being dramatic. I'm being clear. There's a difference." Victoria stared at me, momentarily thrown by my continued composure. She had clearly expected either an emotional outburst or a hasty retreat into accommodation, my usual responses to her provocations. My steady refusal to engage on her terms was something new, something she hadn't prepared for. "This isn't like you," she said finally, her brow furrowed. "You've changed." "Yes," I agreed simply. "I have." "Because of Emilio," she continued, a hint of resentment in her voice. "He's turned you against your family." I shook my head. "Emilio hasn't turned me against anyone. He supported me in establishing healthier boundaries, something I should have done years ago." Victoria's expression darkened. "Boundaries? With your own sister? That's ridiculous. We're family." "Family doesn't mean accepting behavior that hurts you," I said gently. "Even from a sister." She leaned forward, switching tactics. "Look, Ariana, I understand you're upset about the dress. Maybe it wasn't my best decision. But surely we can move past this for mother and father's sake. Their anniversary dinner is important to them." This small concession, "maybe it wasn't my best decision," was the closest Victoria had ever come to acknowledging wrongdoing. In the past, it would have been enough for me to grasp at, eager for any sign of reconciliation. But now I recognized it for what it was, the minimum offered to regain access, not a genuine recognition of the pattern or its impact. "I'll attend the anniversary dinner," I assured her, "and I'll be perfectly civil. But I won't pretend everything is fine between us when it isn't. That kind of pretense hasn't served either of us well." Victoria sat back, studying me with a mixture of frustration and calculation. "What exactly do you want from me, Ariana? Some grand public apology? Self-flagellation over a dress?" The dismissive characterization was typical, reducing a significant Breach of wedding etiquette and a lifetime pattern of similar behaviors to address, as if my concerns were trivial. What I want, I said carefully, is acknowledgement. Not just of the white dress incident, but of the pattern it represents. I want you to understand that your need to be the center of attention has repeatedly come at my expense, and I want some indication that you're willing to change that dynamic going forward. Victoria's laugh held no humor. So I'm the villain in this story? The selfish sister who deliberately ruins your special moments? That's how you see me? I met her gaze steadily. I see someone who's never had to consider how her actions affect others. Someone who's been allowed, encouraged even, to prioritize her needs and desires above everyone else's. I don't think that's made you happy, Victoria, and it's definitely hurt our relationship. For a moment, something vulnerable flashed in Victoria's eyes, a glimpse of uncertainty or perhaps recognition, but it was quickly shuttered, replaced by the more familiar armor of indignation. "This is absurd," she declared, pushing her untouched coffee aside. "I came here hoping for reconciliation, and instead you're lecturing me about my character flaws." "I'm not lecturing," I corrected her gently. "I'm being honest about my experience and what I need to move forward. That's not an attack. It's an invitation to a different kind of relationship." Victoria stood abruptly, gathering her designer handbag. "Well, it feels like an attack, and I didn't come here to be attacked." I remained seated, maintaining my composure. "I'm sorry you feel that way. The invitation stands whenever you're ready." She hesitated, seemingly thrown by my refusal to escalate or apologize. In the past, I would have immediately backpedaled, apologizing for upsetting her and promising to move past the issue. My calm steadiness in maintaining my position was clearly unsettling. "Fine," she said finally. "I'll see you at the anniversary dinner. Try to be civil for mother and father's sake, if nothing else." "I already said I would be," I reminded her mildly. With a last frustrated glance, Victoria turned and strode out of the cafe, her exit lacking the dramatic impact it might have had if I'd engaged in the emotional confrontation she'd been anticipating. I watched her leave. I felt a curious mixture of sadness and liberation. The exchange had confirmed what I had begun to recognize at the wedding. The power dynamic between Victoria and me had fundamentally shifted. Not because I had finally confronted her or exposed her behavior, though the white dress incident had certainly done that, but because I had changed how I responded to her provocations and manipulations. I finished my latte in the quiet cafe, reflecting on what had just transpired. This conversation had been the decisive strike in our transformed relationship. Not because of anything Victoria had said or done, but because of what I had refused to do. I had declined to react emotionally, to justify myself excessively, to accommodate her unreasonable expectations, or to retreat from my clearly stated boundaries. When I returned home, Emilio was waiting with barely concealed concern. "How did it go?" he asked as I hung up my jacket. "About as expected," I replied, settling beside him on the couch. Victoria wanted us to pretend everything is normal for my parents' anniversary dinner. When I refused to do that without some real acknowledgement of the issue, she walked out. Emilio nodded, unsurprised. "And how do you feel about it?" I considered the question carefully. Sad, in some ways. There's a part of me that still wishes for the sister relationship I never had. But also, peaceful? I said what I needed to say without getting drawn into her drama. I maintained my boundaries without attacking her. That feels like progress. Major progress, Emilio agreed, pulling me into a supportive embrace. "You didn't let her dictate the terms of engagement." That's exactly it, I realized. In the past, Victoria always controlled how our conflicts played out, either through direct confrontation where she could paint me as overly emotional, or through my silent accommodation where she got her way. Today, I chose a different path. Healthier one. Emilio observed. Definitely healthier, I agreed. Though I'm not looking forward to my parents' anniversary dinner. Victoria's likely already shaping the narrative to cast herself as the reasonable one seeking reconciliation. While I'm being stubborn and unforgiving, Emilio's expression grew thoughtful. Maybe. But remember how your father stood up at the wedding? And your mother's call during our honeymoon? Something's shifted in your family dynamic. They might not be as quick to accept Victoria's version as they once would have been. He had a point. The wedding day had catalyzed changes not just between Victoria and me, but within the entire family system. My father's unprecedented intervention, my mother's surprising apology, these suggested a growing recognition of the unhealthy patterns that had defined our family interactions for decades. You're right, I acknowledged. I keep expecting the old dynamics to reassert themselves, but maybe that's not giving everyone enough credit for the capacity to change. Including yourself, Emilio pointed out gently. The Ariana of a year ago might have left that cafe in tears, or agreed to Victoria's terms for the sake of peace. Today, you held your ground with calm conviction. I smiled, recognizing the truth in his words. The decisive strike in this long battle hadn't been a confrontation or exposure, but my internal shift, my development of the capacity to respond rather than react, to maintain boundaries without hostility, to offer honesty without aggression. Victoria had come to that cafe expecting either surrender or conflict, the two responses she knew how to manipulate. Instead, she had encountered something entirely new. My calm, centered authenticity. And against that, her usual tactics had proven ineffective. My parents' anniversary dinner arrived on a cool autumn evening, almost exactly 2 months after our wedding. Emilio and I arrived at the upscale restaurant my father had selected, both mentally prepared for whatever dynamics might unfold. Remember, Emilio murmured as we handed our coats to the attendant, we're here to celebrate your parents, not to engage in any drama Victoria might try to create. Agreed, I nodded, squeezing his hand gratefully. Direct but calm if she tries anything. The maitre d' led us to a private dining room where my parents were already seated with Victoria, and, to my surprise, a man I didn't recognize, tall, with dark hair and a thoughtful expression. Victoria's date, presumably. Ariana, Emilio. My father rose to greet us with genuine warmth, embracing me and shaking Emilio's hand firmly. So glad you could make it. My mother's welcome was more reserved, but still sincere. You look wonderful, dear, she said, kissing my cheek. Marriage clearly agrees with you. Victoria remained seated, offering a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. Hello, sister, she said, her tone carefully neutral. This is Christopher. Christopher, my sister. Ariana and her husband Emilio. Christopher stood, extending his hand with a genuine smile. I've heard a lot about you both. Congratulations on your recent wedding. The sincere warmth in his greeting caught me off guard. I shook his hand, studying him curiously. He wasn't Victoria's usual type. Her previous boyfriends had typically been flashy, status-conscious men who mirrored her own focus on appearances and social standing. Christopher seemed more substantial somehow, his quiet confidence a stark contrast to Victoria's usual companions. As we took our seats, I caught Victoria watching my assessment of Christopher, an unreadable expression on her face. Christopher is an architect, my father explained, clearly approving. He designed the new community arts center downtown. That's impressive, Emilio remarked genuinely. I attended the opening last month. The integration of natural light with the gallery, spaces, is remarkable. Christopher looked pleased by the specific observation. Thank you. Finding that balance was one of the project's biggest challenges. The conversation flowed more naturally than I had expected as we ordered drinks and appetizers. My parents shared stories about their 40 years together, some familiar and some surprisingly new. Christopher proved to be thoughtful and articulate, asking insightful questions that drew out even more anecdotes. Victoria remained unusually quiet, observing more than participating. When she did speak, her comments were measured, lacking the subtle barbs or attention-seeking behaviors I had come to expect. Several times I caught her glancing at Christopher as if gauging his reaction to her interactions with our family. By the time the main course arrived, I had begun to form a theory. Victoria was on her best behavior because of Christopher. She clearly valued his opinion and seemed concerned about how he might perceive her typical family dynamics. During a brief moment when Christopher was engaged in conversation with my father and Emilio about architectural preservation, Victoria leaned slightly toward me. "You were right," she said quietly, her voice barely audible over the ambient restaurant noise. I turned to her, surprised. "About what?" Victoria hesitated, her fingers tracing the rim of her water glass. The white dress. It was deliberate and inappropriate. The simple admission, free of qualifications or deflections, stunned me into momentary silence. In all, our years of conflict, Victoria had never directly acknowledged any wrongdoing without immediately minimizing it or shifting blame. "Thank you for saying that," I managed finally. She nodded once, her eyes darting toward Christopher before returning to me. "He helped me see it differently. He asked how I would feel if someone wore white to my wedding." The parallel to the cafe conversation was striking. I had posed essentially the same question, but coming from Christopher, it had apparently penetrated Victoria's defenses. Before I could respond further, the waiter arrived with dessert menus, shifting our attention back to the group conversation. The brief exchange lingered in my mind, however, not just Victoria's unexpected acknowledgement, but the glimpse of vulnerability behind it. As dessert and coffee were served, my father clinked his glass for attention. "Catherine and I want to thank you all for celebrating this milestone with us," he began, his hand covering my mother's on the table. 40 years isn't always easy, but it's always been worth it." He turned to include both Victoria and me in his gaze. "Family is complicated. We make mistakes. We learn. We grow. Your mother and I haven't always gotten it right, but we've always loved you both, in our imperfect way." The unusual candor in my father's toast created a moment of emotional openness at the table. My mother's eyes glistened with unshed tears, and even Victoria looked momentarily unguarded. "To family," my father concluded, raising his glass. "Past, present, and future." As we all echoed the toast, I caught Victoria watching me again, something uncertain in her expression. The confrontation I had been bracing for all evening, the expected attempt to publicly pressure me into the appearance of reconciliation, never materialized. Instead, Victoria seemed to be undergoing some internal struggle of her own. After dessert, as we prepared to leave, Victoria approached me while Emilio was helping my father with the bill. "Christopher and I are hosting a housewarming next month," she said, the invitation clearly difficult for her to extend. "He's just bought a place in Riverside Heights. We'd like you and Emilio to come if you're free." The offer was genuine, but clearly uncomfortable for her, another departure from our usual pattern. Typically, Victoria's invitations came with an edge of competition or performance, designed to showcase her achievements or social connections. "We'd like that," I replied, noting her surprise at my ready acceptance. "Just text me the details." Victoria nodded, then hesitated as if wanting to say more. Finally, she just added, "Christopher's important to me. I'd like him to get to know my family better." The simple honesty in the statement was refreshing. No grandiose claims about his status or connections, no competitive comparing of relationships, just a straightforward expression of his significance to her. "He seems like a good man," I offered sincerely. "He is," Victoria agreed, a genuine smile briefly softening her features. "He sees me clearly. It's uncomfortable sometimes, but also good." This glimpse of self-awareness was so unexpected that I found myself momentarily at a loss for words. Fortunately, Christopher joined us then, placing a gentle hand on Victoria's back. "Ready to go?" he asked her before turning to me. "It was lovely to meet you, Ariana. I hope we'll see more of you and Emilio." As we said our goodbyes in the restaurant lobby, I observed the interaction between Victoria and Christopher with new interest. There was an ease between them, a natural rhythm to their movements together that suggested genuine compatibility, rather than the strategic partnership Victoria had typically formed with previous boyfriends. In the car heading home, Emilio and I discussed the surprisingly peaceful evening. "No confrontation," he observed. "No passive-aggressive comments. No attempts to make herself the center of attention. That's not the Victoria you've described all these years." "I know," I agreed, still processing the shift. "And that brief moment when she actually acknowledged the white dress stunt? I wasn't prepared for that." "Christopher's influence?" Emilio suggested. "Partly," I nodded. "But there's something else happening, too. She seems, I don't know, more reflective, less certain of her position. The family dynamic is changing," Emilio noted. "Your father's toast made that clear. They're recognizing patterns that have gone unacknowledged for decades." He was right. The confrontation I had anticipated for the anniversary dinner, Victoria, attempting to force a public reconciliation on her terms, had never materialized. Instead, we had experienced something far more powerful, genuine, if tentative, steps toward authentic communication. The white dress incident at our wedding had indeed been a turning point, but not in the way I might have predicted. Rather than causing an irreparable rift, it had created an opportunity for new understanding, not through dramatic confrontation, but through the quiet power of changed responses and shifting perspectives. The weeks following my parents' anniversary, dinner brought gradual but noticeable shifts in family dynamics. My father called more frequently, our conversations extending beyond practical matters to include more personal topics. My mother, while still somewhat reserved, made visible efforts to engage with both Emilio and me without constant comparisons to Victoria or references to her achievements. Victoria herself maintained a careful distance, our communication limited to occasional texts about functional matters. The invitation to her and Christopher's housewarming arrived as promised. A simple digital invite without the elaborate presentation Victoria typically favored for her social events. "Are you sure you want to go?" Elle asked when I mentioned the upcoming housewarming during our weekly lunch. It could be Victoria reverting to form, looking to show off her new relationship and home. It could be, I acknowledged. But something feels different. The way she interacted with Christopher at my parents' anniversary dinner, the small acknowledgement about the wedding dress. I'm cautiously optimistic. Elle remained skeptical. "Just be prepared. Victoria's spent a lifetime perfecting her manipulation tactics. One semi-apology doesn't necessarily signal real change. Trust me, I'm maintaining healthy boundaries," I assured her. "But I'm also trying to be open to the possibility that she's genuinely working on herself." The evening of the housewarming arrived cool and clear. Emilio and I selected a tasteful, but not extravagant housewarming gift, a set of handcrafted ceramic serving pieces from a local artist, and made our way to Christopher's Riverside Heights address. The home was impressive but understated, a renovated historic townhouse with clean modern elements that reflected Christopher's architectural sensibilities. As we approached the front door, I felt a familiar tension building, the habitual anxiety that accompanied any gathering where Victoria held home field advantage. "Remember," Emilio murmured, "we're just guests tonight. No agenda, no expectations." I nodded, taking a deep breath as I rang the doorbell. Christopher answered, welcoming us warmly. "Ariana, Emilio, great to see you again. Come in, please." The interior of the townhouse was stunning, original architectural details preserved and enhanced by thoughtful modern additions. About 20 guests mingled throughout the open first floor, the atmosphere relaxed and convivial. Victoria appeared from the kitchen, and I was immediately struck by how different she seemed in this setting. Gone was the performative quality that typically characterized her social interactions, replaced by a more natural ease as she greeted us. "You came," she said, and I detected genuine pleasure beneath her carefully modulated tone. "Let me show you around." As Victoria led us through the home, pointing out design features and renovation details, I noticed something significant. She consistently credited Christopher's vision and expertise without attempting to position herself as co-creator of the space. This was a marked departure from her usual habit of claiming partial ownership of others' achievements. The tour concluded in the kitchen, where Christopher was arranging a charcuterie board. "Your home is beautiful," I told him sincerely. "You've balanced historic preservation with modern function brilliantly." "Thank you," he smiled, clearly pleased by the specific compliment. "It's been a labor of love. Victoria's been remarkably patient with the process." "Patient isn't usually the first word people associate with me," Victoria admitted, with a self-deprecating laugh that seemed surprisingly genuine. Christopher's hand found hers naturally. "You're full of surprises." The affectionate exchange and Victoria's uncharacteristic moment of self-awareness caught me off guard. This wasn't the calculated performance of a perfect relationship that Victoria typically staged. It felt authentic in a way her previous partnerships never had. As the evening progressed, I observed Victoria's interactions with the other guests. There was a noticeable absence of the one-upmanship and subtle competitiveness that usually marked her social gatherings. She introduced Emilio and me without the usual qualifiers or subtle digs, simply as my sister and her husband, without additional commentary. During a quiet moment when Victoria had stepped away to refresh drinks, one of Christopher's colleagues approached me. "You're Victoria's sister, right?" she asked. "I'm Camilla. I work with Christopher at the firm." "Yes, I'm Ariana," I confirmed. "Nice to meet you." "Victoria speaks very highly of you," Camilla continued, surprising me. "She mentioned you recently. Got married. Congratulations." "Thank you," I replied, trying to mask my confusion. Victoria speaking highly of me to her new social circle was unprecedented. Camilla leaned in slightly, her expression warm. "I hope this isn't overstepping, but Victoria seems really different with Christopher than how she's described herself in previous relationships. More, I don't know, authentic? It's nice to see." Before I could formulate a response, Victoria returned with fresh drinks, effectively ending the conversation. But Camilla's observation lingered in my mind. This wasn't just my perception, others were noticing a change in Victoria as well. Later, as guests began to depart, Victoria approached Emilio and me in a quiet corner of the living room. "Thank you for coming," she said, her typical social mask momentarily lowered to reveal something more vulnerable. "It means a lot that you're here." The simple sincerity in her voice created an opening for genuine connection. "The place is beautiful," I offered. "And Christopher seems wonderful." "He is," Victoria agreed, a soft smile transforming her features. "He sees me clearly, all of me, not just the parts I want to show. It's terrifying and wonderful at the same time." This level of honest self-reflection from Victoria was so unprecedented that I found myself momentarily speechless. "Being known like that changes you," Emilio observed quietly. "In all the best ways." Victoria nodded, her eyes meeting, his with new respect. "Yes, exactly, I'm learning that." A brief silence followed, not uncomfortable but weighted with the significance of this small moment of authentic connection. "We should get together for dinner sometime," Victoria suggested finally. "Just the four of us. Something casual." "We'd like that," I replied, meaning it. As Emilio and I drove home later that evening, We discussed the remarkable shift we'd witnessed. That wasn't the Victoria I've known all my life, I said, still processing the evening. She was different. More grounded, less competitive, almost humble at times. Christopher clearly has a positive influence, Emilio observed. But I think there's more to it than that. The white dress incident at our wedding created a public reckoning that she couldn't easily dismiss or reframe. He was right. When Victoria wore white to our wedding, she had expected either an emotional confrontation that would cast me as irrational or silent accommodation that would preserve her ability to claim attention. Instead, she had encountered a systematic, calm response that neither attacked nor accommodated her inappropriate behavior. And she had found herself subtly but definitively outmaneuvered. More importantly, the incident had been public. Friends, family, and even acquaintances had witnessed both her breach of etiquette and my measured response. Many had clearly formed their own judgments about the situation, creating a social reckoning that Victoria couldn't simply dismiss as my oversensitivity or competitiveness. The public nature of it was significant, I agreed. Victoria's always been able to reframe our private conflicts to suit her narrative. But the wedding was too visible, too clearly inappropriate for her to successfully spin. And now she's experiencing the consequences, not just from you, but from your parents, from mutual friends who saw what happened. That kind of public accountability can be a powerful catalyst for change. The public reckoning that had begun at our wedding was continuing to unfold in subtle but meaningful ways. Victoria's behavior at the housewarming, her more authentic interactions, her acknowledgement of Christopher's contributions without attempting to claim credit, her genuine invitation for future connection, suggested she was beginning to recognize and perhaps reconsider patterns that had defined her approach to relationships for decades. This wasn't a dramatic confrontation or emotional breakdown, but something more profound, the quiet dismantling of defense mechanisms that no longer served their purpose, the tentative emergence of a more authentic self once the carefully constructed facade had been publicly challenged. 3 months after Victoria's housewarming, Emilio and I hosted our first major dinner party in our newly purchased condo. The guest list included friends, colleagues, and, in a significant departure from my previous instincts, my entire family. As I prepared the dining room, arranging place settings and adjusting centerpieces, I caught myself in a moment of reflection. 6 months earlier, the thought of voluntarily bringing Victoria into our home for a social event would have filled me with anxiety. I would have obsessed over every detail, anticipating her critical comments and subtle attempts to undermine me. I would have exhausted myself trying to create a perfect, criticism-proof evening. But today I felt remarkably calm. The dinner party wasn't a test to prove my worth or an opportunity for comparison. It was simply a gathering of people we cared about in the home we had created together. "You seem peaceful," Emilio observed, coming up behind me and wrapping his arms around my waist. Not a hint of pre-Victoria stress. I leaned back against him, smiling. I realized something while setting the table. I'm not worried about what she'll think or say. I'm not bracing for competition or criticism. That's significant, he noted. A real transformation. He was right. In the months since our wedding and Victoria's white dress incident, something fundamental had shifted within me. The change wasn't just in how I responded to Victoria's behavior, but in how I viewed myself in relation to her. The doorbell rang, announcing our first guests. Throughout the evening, people arrived in small groups: Elle and her new boyfriend, Carolina and her husband, colleagues from work, friends from our community volunteer project. My parents arrived bringing a beautiful bouquet and a vintage bottle of wine from my father's collection. Victoria and Christopher were among the last to arrive. As I welcomed them into our home, I noticed Victoria taking in the space with genuine interest rather than the evaluative assessment I had come to expect. "Your place is lovely," she said. and remarkably, there was no subtle comparison or backhanded compliment lurking beneath the surface. The exposed brick wall with those built-in shelves is especially beautiful. That was Emilio's design, I told her, accepting the compliment without the defensive justification I might have added in the past. He has a great eye for integrating original features with our style. Throughout dinner, I found myself fully present in conversations, laughing genuinely at Christopher's architectural anecdotes, engaging with my father's questions about our neighborhood, sharing travel stories with colleagues. I wasn't monitoring Victoria's reactions or guarding against potential slights. I was simply enjoying the evening in our home with people we cared about. Later, as I was bringing out dessert, Ella cornered me in the kitchen. "Who are you and what have you done with my anxious friend?" she teased, though her eyes were serious. "I've never seen you this relaxed with Victoria in the room," I smiled, arranging coffee cups on a tray. "I know, it's strange, isn't it? But I realized tonight that I don't need her approval anymore. I don't even particularly want it. I'm secure in who I am and what I've built with Emilio." Elle studied me for a moment. "That's not just talk. You really mean it. You've actually broken free of the need for validation from your family." "Not completely," I admitted. "There are still moments. But mostly, yes. The wedding was a turning point, not just because of how we handled Victoria's white dress stunt, but because it showed me I could set boundaries without creating drama. I could protect what matters to me without either attacking or accommodating inappropriate behavior." As we rejoined the gathering with dessert and coffee, I caught Victoria observing me with a curious expression. Perhaps she too was noting the change, the absence of the tension and hypervigilance that had characterized our interactions for decades. The transformation wasn't just in how I managed Victoria's behavior, but in how I experienced myself. I had discovered a quiet confidence that didn't depend on external validation or favorable comparisons. I had learned to define my worth based on my own values and authentic connections, rather than others' approval or assessment. This, I realized, was the most significant wedding gift I had received. Not any physical present, but the catalyst for breaking free from patterns that had constrained me for a lifetime. 1 year after our wedding, Emilio and I celebrated our anniversary with a small gathering at our favorite restaurant. Victoria and Christopher joined us, along with my parents, Elle, and several other close friends who had supported us through our wedding day challenges. As we raised glasses in a toast, I looked around the table at the faces of those gathered. My parents, more relaxed and authentic than I had seen them in years. Victoria, sitting close to Christopher, her expression open in a way that still sometimes surprised me. Ella, who had stood by me through every phase of the journey. And Emilio, whose unwavering support had helped me find the strength to change patterns I had once thought immutable. "To 1 year," Emilio offered, raising his glass, "and to new beginnings." The sentiment perfectly captured what had emerged from the white dress incident and its aftermath, not just a successful defense of our wedding day, but the establishment of a new family equilibrium built on healthier foundations. After dinner, Victoria approached me while the others were engaged in conversation over dessert. "I've been seeing someone," she said quietly. "A therapist, I mean." The voluntary disclosure caught me by surprise. That's great, Victoria." She nodded, her fingers tracing the stem of her wine glass. "Christopher suggested it initially, but it's been good. Challenging, but good." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "We've been talking about patterns, family dynamics, my need to be the center of attention." The level of self-awareness in this admission was remarkable coming from Victoria, who had spent decades denying or justifying her behavior. "I'm glad you're finding it helpful," I replied sincerely. "I don't think I ever thanked you," she continued, meeting my eyes directly, "for not humiliating me at your wedding. You could have exposed me publicly, thrown me out. You had every right to. Instead, you just neutralized the situation, handled it with grace." I didn't want drama, I explained simply. I just wanted to enjoy my wedding day. Well, your response taught me something important, she admitted. There are better ways to handle conflict than either attacking or giving in. I'm still learning that. As we rejoined the larger group, I marveled at how profoundly our family dynamic had transformed. Victoria's white dress stunt, intended to disrupt our wedding and center attention on herself, had instead catalyzed a series of changes that none of us could have predicted. My parents had been forced to confront patterns of favoritism and enabling they had maintained for decades. Victoria had experienced the consequences of her behavior not through dramatic rejection, but through calm boundary setting that proved more effective than any confrontation. And I had discovered my own capacity for strategic response rather than emotional reaction. The new equilibrium that emerged wasn't perfect. Victoria still occasionally slipped into old competitive behaviors. My mother sometimes fell back on familiar patterns of comparison. I still found myself tensing in anticipation of dynamics that had defined our family interactions for so long. But these were now exceptions rather than the rule. The baseline had shifted toward greater authenticity, clearer boundaries, and more genuine connection. We were learning, slowly but steadily, how to relate to each other as the adults we had become rather than the roles we had played for so long. As Emilio drove us home from the anniversary dinner, he asked what I was thinking, about noticing my reflective mood. I was just realizing, I replied, that Victoria crashing our wedding in white might have been one of the best things that could have happened to our family. Emilio raised an eyebrow. That's a perspective shift. I smiled, watching the city lights pass outside the window. Without that crisis point, we might have continued in the same patterns indefinitely. Instead, it forced everything into the open. It created an opportunity for change. And you were ready for that opportunity, Emilio noted. That's what made the difference. He was right. The white dress incident hadn't automatically transformed our family dynamic. It had simply created an opening, one that I had been prepared to navigate with strategic clarity rather than reactive emotion. As we arrived home and settled into the comfortable rhythm of our evening routine, I felt profound gratitude for the journey of the past year. My sister had crashed my wedding wearing white, but instead of ruining the day as she had intended, she had inadvertently set in motion a healing process that had benefited us all. The new equilibrium we had established wasn't based on pretense or accommodation, but on honest recognition of both our connections and our boundaries. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. And in that reality lay the possibility of something I had never fully experienced with my family before. Authentic relationship built on mutual respect, rather than prescribed roles or power dynamics. That, I realized, was the true happy ending to the white dress story. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.